Östervägar, the Viking East Road, was a trade route through the southern archipelago of Finland during the Iron Age. Along the route, Vikings traveled as far as Novgorod, Constantinople, and even Baghdad. The East Road began at Arholma in Sweden and ran through Åland to the southwestern outer archipelago of Finland where, for example, the strait between Hiittinen and Ruusala, then known as Öresund, was an important port and a trading post. The eastward route was used not only by Vikings but also by other travelers and traders, and an old Danish document shows how the journey from Hiittis continued to Hanko, and from there to Räävel, that is, present-day Tallinn. This document lists places to stay overnight, in general important locations where it was favorable to wait for the winds to change. The inhabitants of the Finnish coastal area traded extensively in summer with those sailing on the east coast, but as a precautionary measure, most of this trade took place only in the outer archipelago, since on the mainland there would have been a risk of robbery and attack by potentially greedy travelers. A question that has long intrigued Finns and to which no conclusive answer has yet been given is whether the Vikings visited other parts of Finland than just the southernmost coasts. It may be worth noting that Finland, as we understand it today, did not exist, of course. There were no land borders. There was no single Finnish nation. We were a collage of tribes speaking different Finno-Ugric languages, and this is part of the reason why the idea of a poor Viking-era Finland inhabited from the outskirts is deeply rooted in the academy. Mikko Moilanen, an archaeologist and blacksmith specializing in Viking swords, writes in his book Viking Swords in Finland how the large number of sword finds challenges these deep-rooted perceptions. The assumption that Viking swords in Finland were only acquired by village chiefs or otherwise wealthy individuals is simply wrong. The number of finds clearly indicates that others could have afforded swords too. Finland has the third largest number of Viking Age swords in the world, with more than 400. What makes this remarkable is that this number is even higher than in Iceland, Denmark and the Baltic countries, and only in the Viking countries of origin, Sweden and Norway, is the number of sword finds more abundant. As many as 31 of the famous Ulfberht swords have been found, and the majority of these finds are inland rather than on the coast. It should also be mentioned that the total number of Ulfberht sword finds worldwide is only around 170, of which 44 were found in Norway, so Finland's 31 finds are a very significant and important number. So, where did these swords come from? Barter or plunder? There are several mentions of military expeditions to Finland in the Scandinavian archives. A runestone, now destroyed, bears an inscription. Björn and Egilfrid erected this stone in memory of their son, Utrygg. He was killed in Finland. The sagas also mention on a couple of occasions extensive conflicts with the Finns. Words such as Finnar and Finlendingar are used about Finns. The saga of Olaf den Helige, dating from the 11,000s to the 12,000s, describes the exploits of the Norwegian king. He sailed with his army to the Finnish coast and continued his raiding expedition inland. In a valley called Herdalar, the Viking army was ambushed. According to the saga, the Finns attacked from the forest, from all directions, and Olaf lost many men in the retreat. The Finns forced the Vikings to flee along the coast, bringing bad weather upon them, much to the Vikings' chagrin. It should be mentioned that Icelandic legends often confuse the Finns and the Sami people. The Sami tradition included spellcasting, and the Viking people were well acquainted with this ability, as the relationship between the two peoples was active both in terms of bartering and the exchange of information. It is therefore to be assumed that the saga of Olaf den Helige also links the Finns living in the south with witchcraft, even if it did not flourish in the south as a similar tradition. But would it be possible to find evidence of this great trade inland? There is a runestone that says the following. Brusi had this stone erected by his brother Egil. He died in Tafaistalandi, where Brusi led the invasion forces of his country. He traveled with Frögir. May God and God's mother help his soul. Sven and Åsmund made this monument. This is what it says on a runestone originally erected in Söderby, Sweden, some 1000 years ago. The stone tells a story of a military expedition to Tafaistalandi, that is, Häme, during which one of the Viking chieftains was killed. According to the Academy of Finland, Tafaistalandi, mentioned in the runestone, refers to the southern coast of Finland, not Häme. This is somewhat a strange conclusion. Although Häme was a known trading center, the possibility has been ruled out that Egil, Frögir and Brusi and their Viking armies might have visited the Finnish interior. We can safely assume that the raid itself took place on the basis of the runestone, but the place of the raid and the size of the Viking army itself are debatable. The Finnish philosopher and historian of science Erkka Maula has tickled people's interest in the raid in question. Maula wrote a colorful play called Teponlinna about the Viking expedition to Häme. According to the script, Frögir, Egil and Brusi had assembled an army of some 200 ships and 2,000 Vikings to plunder the fur reserves of Finland and to subjugate the Finns to Swedish rule so that they could collect taxes from them every year. The main destination of the expedition was the center of the sable trade in Nokia. Sable skins were a valuable commodity as they were almost extinct, and one good skin could be worth the value of a small farm. The Viking chiefs and their armies would arrive in the wide Kokemäki River delta, from where they would sail inland. The raid in Nokia was a success. The skins were loaded onto ships, and the journey continued to Lake Pyhäjärvi. At Pyhäjärvi, the Viking army was split into two separate forces, which later proved to be a major mistake. Frögir, who commanded the whole army, ordered the second force, led by Egil and Brusi, to advance along the Mallasvesi to Iltasmäki in Pälkäne. Frögir himself headed towards Lusi via Vanajavesi. These inland waterways in Häme were familiar to the Vikings, as peaceful trading had long been practiced in the same area. However, the scattered forces were met with surprisingly strong resistance. The fierceness of the resistance was not due to large numbers of defenders, but to the strategically chosen locations and methods of attack. Egil, one of the chiefs, died of a bear spear. Frögir was hit by an arrow and later died of his injuries in Saarenmaa. Brusi, the only surviving chief, managed to return to Sweden, where he had a monument erected to the memory of Egil. This supposed journey of the Vikings took them along the Kokemäki River to Nokia. From there to Hämeenlinna, and after fierce fighting, the Vikings' flight forced them to head along small rivers and lakes towards Mäntsälä, where the Porvoo River offered the possibility of returning to the sea via Porvoo. In reality, it is not known what the purpose of Frögir's expedition was. It may even be that Olaf den Heliges and Frögir's journey are connected, as it is clear from the runestone that was erected that the chiefs of Frögir were Christians, and we also know that Olaf den Helige represented Christianity and its promotion. In Finland, for example, there are medieval churches named after Saint Olaf. This story as a whole is so interesting that it compelled me to do some research. It is true that so far no actual Iron Age battlefields have been found in Finland, but rather burial or sacrificial weapons. But Viking Age cemeteries are plentiful, and interestingly enough, some of the finds are concentrated along the imaginary route of the story. I don't know if anyone in Finland has considered the origin of the name Brusi or Brusila, Brusi is thought to be at least partly a variant of the name Ambrosius, which became widespread in Christianized Europe. I made the observation that in Finland both the place names and surnames Brusi and Brusila lie close to the route of the raid. Is this a coincidence or some old surviving tradition where the confusion caused during the Viking chief's escape has taken root in the family tree? In addition, the Ulfbert swords found in Finland follow the imaginary route of the raid from the Kokemäki River to Mäntsälä. Is this related to the Hammer Trading Center and the bartering that took place there, or are these swords stolen from the fleeing Viking warriors? I wonder if an Ulfbert found along the Porvoo River could be some kind of evidence of this event, or at least an interesting discovery. And is it a coincidence that on an old map from 1873, on the shore of Mallusjärvi, where the inland lakes and rivers meet the Porvoo River, there is a mound and a farm called Brusila? I presented this intriguing legend to my colleague Joonas Hellevaara, and together we decided to set out in the search of evidence of the lost trade, starting with the Mallusjärvi area and the Brusila cliffs. From this adventure we are putting together a multipart series which we hope will of course shed further light on the story. I would like to express a big thank you to Findetector, Finland's largest metal detector specialists, who sponsored me with a Garrett metal detector and a pinpointer. A big thank you also to the current Brusila farm owner couple. The conversations, coffee and ice cream were a great addition to our day. And as agreed, we will be returning to the surroundings.
Me ollaan nyt Mallusjärven jylhillä kallioilla. Mallusjärvi on suhteellisen suuri sisämaajärvi, mikä yhtyy Porvoojokeen, joka sitten laskee alas Suomenlahteen. Ja se mikä tässä Mallusjärvessä on mielenkiintoista on ihan tässä järven eteläpuolella sijaitsee vanhan 1873 vuoden kartan mukaan niin kallio taikka tila nimeltä Brusila, joka liittyy tämän päivän mielenkiintoiseen seikkailuun. Eli viittaa vanhaan viikinkipäällikköön Brusiin, joka legendan mukaan purjehti läpi Suomen pakomatkallaan Hämeenlinnasta mahdollisesti sisävesien kautta Mäntsälään, sieltä Porvoojokea pitkin aina Suomenlahteen. Säkin kyllä mystinen. Pitäisikö mun tulla sinne? Mikä se on?
Suoklöntti.
Antako se
Tuossa on kyllä
mitä signaalia?
rautaa. Joo, rautaa. Mutta on sen verran hapertunut, että paha sanoa.
No niin Joonas, onks hyvä pähkinä? Oh. Aikamoinen päivä.
Ensimmäinen päivä.
Ensimmäinen kenttäpäivä Brusin legendan äärellä. Me käytiin Mallusjärven eteläpuoleisissa metsissä ja kukkuloilla. Tavattiin siellä mukava tilanpitäjä pariskunta. Saatiin luvat käydä tutkimassa hieman maastoa. Oli kyllä mielenkiintoista maastoa. Mitä me löydettiin?
Semmoista, siis tosi puhdas oli paikka. Ei ollut mitään semmoista suurta liikehdintää ollut. Hevosen kenkiä, hevosen kenkänauloja. Granaatisirpale oli vähän erikoisempi löytö. Mietittiin, että kuinkahan pitkältä matkalta se sirpale on lentänyt sinne. Sitten taittoveitsi. Muutama 1920-luvun penni, kolikko. Mutta ei mitään niin historiallista, mitä lähdettiin hakemaan.
Ei päästy kuin parhaimmillaan reilu 100 vuotta taaksepäin.
Kyllä.
Ajassa. Muutama luoti löytyy.
Juu,
Ehyessä.
moderni luoti.
Kyllä. Mut joo.
Tässä olisi tarkoitus varmaan lähteä nyt sit jokea ylöspäin.
Joo, täytyy katsoa, että miten tehdään. Mua henkilökohtaisesti kiinnostaisi se Porvoojoen varrella oleva Askolan hiidenkirnujen lähellä. Siellä on muutamia sellaisia jyrkkiä kalliorakenteita, jotka on varmasti herättänyt mielenkiintoa, jos siitä ohi ollaan isolla rykmentillä menty. Se, mikä tässä tällä hetkellä puuttuu, on tieto siitä, että kuinka leveä Porvoojoki on noin 1000 vuotta sitten ollut. Et se ei varmasti ollut niissä uomissaan, missä tällä hetkellä. Et todennäköisesti se on ollut leveämpi. Maa on kuitenkin ehtinyt nousta jo aika mukavasti tuossa 1000 vuoden aikana.
Se, että jos saisi selville niitä mahdollisia rantautumispaikkoja, niin nehän olisi aika huikeita.
Niin ja sit mä etsisin niinku siltä reitiltä just sellaisia hyvin lähellä sitä reittiä olleita tai Porvoojokea lähellä olleita korkeita maastonkohtia. Esimerkiksi se Askolan ne hiidenkirnun kalliot. Itse asiassa niiden kallioiden vastakkaiset kalliot on niinku todella huikeat.
Eli just semmosia, mitä on mahdollisesti voinut näkyä siitä joelta.
Juu, ne on ihan kiinni.
Semmosia huomiota kiinnittäviä
Kyllä.
maanmuotoja.
Joo. Tietysti mä en tiedä, haksahtaako tässä ajattelussa, jos tää on ollut pakoreissu, niin onkohan sellaisia muotoja niin kuin vältetty sen takia tai niistä on pyritty nopeasti ohi, koska mahdollinen hyökkäys niiden päältä olisi saattanut olla todennäköinen. En tiedä. No mut jos niissä on taistelua käytössä, sitähän se saattaa olla, että siinä on jouduttu vaikka jalkautumaan tai rymistelemään metsässä ja raahaamaan haavoittuneita.
Lähdetäänkö kanootilla katsomaan semmosia? Eikö mä mietin vaan just sitä, että pitäisiköhän meidän lähteä sitä jokea pitkin menemään.
Se olisi kyllä aika kova juttu, koska sit sulla on niinku ensikohtainen näkemys siitä, että mikä näyttää ja miltä.
Juu.
Se olisi kyllä tosi hieno juttu. Mut joo, oli kyllä antoisa päivä.
Joo, maanomistajat oli kyllä
Joo,
siis todella vieraanvaraisia.
todella suuri kiitos siitä, että saatiin lupa käydä.
Juu, ja iso monen hehtaarin alueet, niin se on kyllä aina kiva harrastaa, jos on samanhenkistä porukkaa.
On ja uskomattoman vieraanvaraisia, että kahvit ja jäätelöt tarjottiin. Ai että, teki nannaa päivän jälkeen. Ei kai tässä tällä erää. Me jatketaan reissua. Brusia ei vielä löytynyt. Brusin legenda elää edelleen.
Merkkejä ryöstöretkestä.
Kyllä. Katsotaan mihin päädytään. Ja.